Sacramento media has a certain importance to it that you don't hear too much about in Sacramento media or anywhere else. And who knows why that is, but it's actually played a pretty big part in United States history. Let's take a look at some of the ways that Sacramento media has helped shape the national media industry. Going back to the 1960s, you could point to several local media personalities that went through Sacramento that ended up as national stars. Some of these people weren't really big names, but they still played a part in national history. Rick Carroll, who went to school at Sac State, was part of KERS, which was a freeform student-run radio station on campus. Ended up becoming a national radio consultant for the Rock of the 80s format, in which he was the program director at K-Rock in Los Angeles. That format eventually helped shape the alternative radio format, which was pretty big in the 1990s, although it began to fade after the 90s as radio got way too corporate. Speaking of corporate, the biggest newspaper chain in America is McClatchy Newspapers, and the original flagship newspaper was the Sacramento Bee. The biggest radio corporation in America in 2015 continues to be iHeartRadio, which is part of iHeartMedia. Originally, the company was called Clear Channel, and it was built on a merger with a company called AM/FM, which started in Sacramento with KFBK and Y92 back in the late 90s. Premier Networks is the largest radio syndication company in America, and it is owned by iHeartMedia, and it delivers the Rush Limbaugh Show. Rush Limbaugh got his start in Kansas City before making his mark in Sacramento at KFBK. Then he went on to become a nationally syndicated host, and ultimately the highest paid radio personality in the radio industry in America. One of the top radio stations in Sacramento throughout the 60s and 70s was KROY. It was on the AM dial at 1240 and also the FM dial at 96.9. It later became the Eagle, but in the 60s it brought us personalities that went on to become national stars, such as recording artist Lynn Anderson, who had the hit Rose Garden in 1971. Gary Owens became a big radio star in Los Angeles and went on to become a star on the TV show Laugh-In. Croy's general manager, Dwight Case, went on to become the president of RKO Radio Network, which included radio stations such as KFRC in San Francisco and KHJ in Los Angeles, and several other legendary radio stations around the country. Don Imus was on KXOA AM and went on to become a nationally syndicated radio host. KCRA, which has been a top television station in Sacramento for decades, helped usher in color television in 1965. They were the first NBC affiliate to do so, according to press releases back then. Certainly the first Northern California television station to offer all color television programming at that time. A few years earlier, they had built one of the world's tallest television towers in Walnut Grove, which expanded their coverage. KZAP personality Kerry Nosler, also known as Captain Carrot, got his own nationally syndicated television show on CBS called PM Magazine in the late 70s. Dave Walker was a TV news anchor on KOVR in Sacramento in the 70s and then at KCRA. In 1979, he married Lois Hart, and a year later, the two of them formed the first news team on CNN for a national broadcast. They stayed there until 1990, then they returned to Sacramento at KCRA, where they stayed until 2008. Lester Holt attended Cordova High and graduated in 1977, and then went on to Sac State before becoming a news announcer for KRAK-AM, and eventually, in 2015, he became the anchor on NBC Nightly News. These are just some of the stories in which Sacramento stations and media personnel have helped shape the national picture of American media history.